being able to welcome in people from around the world, particularly at this time of labor shortages, is good for our country.
There is no better time to hire and invest in Canadian workers.
These immigration levels allow us to bring in the skills and talent we need to fill the labor gaps.
We're looking at a number of options that, frankly, Canadians have been talking to us about on the permanent residency numbers.
Is Justin Trudeau finally abandoning mass immigration? Well, at a cabinet retreat in Halifax yesterday, Justin Trudeau, it appears, decided that after 9 years of mass immigration, it may in fact be time to slow things down now that Canadians have been pushed to the brink. Before a massive expose in the Toronto Star was to be released, which we will get into later on in the show, about how the federal government intentionally fast-tracked the hiring of temporary foreign workers, Justin Trudeau attempted to get out in front of the situation and put an end to all of the cheap foreign labor fun for corporate Canada. Now, not only is the federal government now announcing major cuts to the temporary foreign worker program, it also appears that the federal government is prepared to cut the permanent residency numbers as well. 15% of Canada's entire population has been added since Justin Trudeau became Prime Minister. That is simply an outrageous amount of people in a small country like ours. Canada's population has never grown so fast, and now all of a sudden, it seems that the federal government is taking a major U-turn. But the question remains, why? Well, we're going to get into all of that on the show today, but before we do, be sure to drop a like on this video, help us out by subscribing to the True North YouTube channel, and the comment question for the episode is this: would the federal government have reversed mass immigration if the Conservatives had fought this issue years ago? Let me know your answer in the comments below, and let's get into it. Well, after intentionally putting Canada on a path of self-destruction, of ballooning Canada's population at record paces and neglecting the needs of Canada's youth, Justin Trudeau has decided that actually, when it comes to the temporary foreign worker program, it's time for a major U-turn. It was okay after the pandemic to suppress Canadian wages, neglect Canadian youth, and stuff the pockets of Canadian corporations. But now that Canadians are really upset about this situation, it's time for a U-turn. Take a listen to his comments yesterday.
Today's economy is very different from it was 2 years ago. Inflation has started to come down, employment is higher, and we no longer need as many temporary foreign workers. We need Canadian businesses to invest in training and technology and not increasing their reliance on low-cost foreign labor. It's not fair to Canadians struggling to find a good job, and it's not fair to those temporary foreign workers, some of whom are being mistreated and exploited.
Well, what are those changes going to look like exactly? In a nutshell, employers will no longer be allowed to hire 20% of their workforce as low-wage temporary foreign workers. That number will be reduced down to 10%. What are these corporations possibly going to do when 1 in every 10 employees is a temporary foreign worker? The changes also include the government refusing to process work permits in industries where the unemployment rate is 6% or higher, with exceptions in the seasonal food, agriculture, construction, and healthcare industries. In a statement on Monday, Employment and Social Development Canada, the organization responsible for the mass expansion of the temporary foreign worker program, criticized employers for refusing to hire talented Canadians and being able to keep prices low by hiring temporary foreigners. Now, that is the same government department that actually rubber-stamped all of the hiring of temporary foreign workers. So they're criticizing employers for taking advantage of a system that they started. The same thing that Justin Trudeau is doing to employers.
There is no better time to hire and invest in Canadian workers.
But yesterday, Justin Trudeau's employment minister, Randy Boissonnault, was desperately trying to defend the hiring of low-wage temporary foreign workers.
Some of the rhetoric out there is just downright unhelpful, and we're talking about making sure that we have businesses in rural and remote Canada that can actually stay open. And if you're talking about 1 out of 10 workers or 2 out of 20 workers that actually keeps an inn working, and that inn is the only restaurant in that community, and that community is where the people who work to build that community reside on a temporary basis while they're building up that community, that's not something that I'm prepared as jobs minister to see disappear in rural and remote Canada.
Well, get this, the public pressure on the federal government to curb mass immigration It was so great that now we have Immigration Minister Mark Miller announcing that he will be reducing permanent residency numbers.
I'd say all options are currently on the table. It's not a discussion that's been had by Cabinet yet, but we're looking at a number of options that, frankly, Canadians have been talking to us about on the permanent residency numbers. Often at Cabinet we consider options that are pretty narrow. This will be a broad set of alternatives to have a complete discussion on. Look at where the country is currently, look at where the country is going, and making sure that we adjust. And so it'll include potential options on the upcoming year as well.
Last year, the federal government made history when it was announced that they would be processing 500,000 permanent residency applications per year.
I'm pleased to share that Canada intends to maintain its target of welcoming 485,000 new permanent residents in 2024 and 500,000 in 2025. Starting in 2026, the number of newcomers we aim to welcome will stabilize at 500,000.
Because, of course, the argument we were being fed for years by the Trudeau government was that there was a labor shortage that needed to be filled by immigrants, that we needed to keep increasing Canada's population at record paces because large corporations needed workers and Canadians weren't taking jobs.
Being able to welcome in people from around the world, particularly at this time of labor shortages, is good for our country.
These immigration levels allow us to bring in the skills and talent we need to fill the labor gaps.
We're seeing right across the country the impacts of the labor shortage that we have, whether it's in our healthcare system, whether it's small businesses that can't stay open 7 days a week like they'd want to. We need more people.
Canadians understand the need to continue to grow our population if we're going to meet the needs of the labor force, and it's hard to find workers. The reality is you don't need to dig into the stats to understand that there was a million jobs available in the Canadian economy. You need to walk down Main Street of any community in Canada. You're going to see help wanted signs in the window.
So because of that, we're going to allow millions of international students into the country. We're going to allow hundreds of thousands of temporary foreign workers into the country, and we're going to welcome in 500,000 new permanent residents into the country each year. For a better understanding and a visual as to just how quickly Canada's population has ballooned over the past just 4 years, economist Mike Moffat, who is also one of Justin Trudeau's economic advisors, put this tweet out yesterday. And he wrote this: at the end of 2024, we will only be through 4 years of this decade. Despite that, Canada will have added more people to its population than we did in any of the 4 previous decades. And what has come from all of this growth? Has Canada's economy boomed? Well, actually, Canada's per capita GDP has been decreasing. Crime seems to be increasing. Do Canadians feel safe in their cities anymore? I think we all know the answer to that. Youth unemployment has skyrocketed. Housing starts have actually managed to decrease. So Canada's housing market has become even more difficult to break into. Canadians are getting poorer. Young Canadians are struggling to find work. Young Canadians, and frankly, Canadians of all ages, are having extreme difficulty finding housing and being able to afford rent. And I think it's pretty safe to say that social cohesion across this country has fallen apart as well. So that's what we get with all of this population growth. What a gift. Thank you so much for this. But where does this sudden U-turn really come from? It certainly doesn't come from political opposition from the Conservatives. They've basically been holding the Liberal government's hand with immigration over the past 9 years. It comes from grassroots public outcry. It came from Canadian citizens, patriotic citizens, exposing the massive LMIA immigration fraud taking place in this country. It came from Canadians relentlessly calling out mass immigration for the housing crisis taking place in our country. I would say that a big shout out for this massive change in public policy deserves to go to the patriotic Canadian citizen who mapped out all of the positive LMIA applications given to employers in Canada on the LMIA map. So Canadians could zoom in on their town or city and find out who was abusing the temporary foreign worker system. And no doubt a lot of it came from this Toronto Star expose into the temporary foreign worker program that was released today. Government officers told to skip fraud prevention steps when vetting temporary foreign worker applications, Star investigation finds. According to this incredible piece of journalism from the Toronto Star, believe it or not, I know it is in fact possible for them to do some good journalism. This is one example of it. From the Toronto Star's piece, according to internal ESDC documents obtained by the Star and interviews with a current ESDC employee, routine checks meant to ensure the system is not abused by unscrupulous employers have been suspended in an effort to process applications faster. Those checks include contacting employers to confirm they actually applied to hire a worker, verifying that lawyers and consultants applying on behalf of employers are in good standing with the regulator, and clarifying the overtime, vacation, and benefits promised to the worker. So the federal government didn't actually bother to do any checks into the temporary foreign worker program before just fast-tracking the applications and allowing the program to expand. Allowing the program to expand to hundreds of thousands of temporary foreign workers. Hundreds of thousands of workers who are being abused in many cases, are unaware of their rights, are potentially and quite likely being paid under the table, being paid under minimum wage, and suppressing the wages of Canadians, resulting in not only just harm to these workers, but harm to Canadian people. For what benefit? Who wins? I've tried to say this before, and I'll say it again. Who wins in this situation? It's not the Canadian people. We know that. It's also not the temporary foreign workers. The winners are employers. The winners are these large employers hiring these temporary foreign workers. And when it comes to international students, the winners aren't even the students. The winners in this instance are the colleges and again the employers who have been allowed to hire these international students. And the losers are all of us. You know, in 2019, People's Party leader Maxime Bernier was the only politician to actually address mass immigration in this country. It was a key policy point in his 2019 election campaign. Say no to mass immigration. Do you remember seeing these billboards around your city, or maybe reading about them in the news, reading about how racist and divisive this messaging was? That's what the legacy media tried to tell us about Maxime Bernier's message in 2019. And that's also what the federal Conservative Party tried to tell us as well about Maxime Bernier's message in 2019. Because if you will recall, in 2019, the Conservative Party hired an outside PR firm to smear and attack Maxime Bernier as a racist for calling out mass immigration. Not only did the Conservatives say nothing at all about immigration, they actually went out of their way to attack the only party addressing the issue. Have Conservative politicians actually really said anything at all about immigration? The number one issue facing this country? We know what Pierre Poilievre has said about immigration. He has repeated the line that Justin Trudeau has broken Canada's immigration system. It was a convenient phrase for him to use to avoid actually addressing the issue and to say something, but without any real substance, to say that the immigration system is broken. In a French language interview, Pierre Poilievre did say that the number of international students admitted into Canada would be lowered significantly. After, of course, the federal government announced cuts to that program. When it was unpopular in the legacy media and the political circles in Ottawa to speak about mass immigration, but popular across the country to speak about immigration, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party were nowhere to be found. It's fair to say, actually, that the Conservatives never actually stood up with the majority of Canadian people to speak about this issue back in 2022, and at any time really in 2023. It's all kind of similar to what the Conservative Party did during the Freedom Convoy and during the pandemic, if my memory served me right. They waited until the public pressure, the bottom-up, citizen-led pressure, forced the federal government to actually make a change before the Conservatives said anything at all. Once Canadian citizens were sufficiently smeared as conspiracy theorists and the fringe minority, when the ball had been put on the 1-yard line away from the end zone, that's when the Conservatives picked up the ball, ran the 1 yard into the end zone, and celebrated a victory. Now, are we going to see the same result? Now that Canadians were attacked as racist and xenophobic and anti-immigration, now that the public pressure has finally paid off on the government to actually do something about this, are the Conservatives now finally going to speak about this? What would have happened if back in 2019 the Conservatives actually did address mass immigration? What if this issue was mainstream back then? Might Canada's per capita GDP have increased? Would young Canadians be facing the unemployment issues that they are right now? Maybe wages would have increased for low-skilled jobs, attracting young Canadians to these jobs. Just maybe the housing situation might not be as bad. It would have been nice to see the political opposition fight and oppose the government when it was unpopular to do so, but the right thing to do. Not just once the legacy media and the federal government themselves have already made the change. But I guess we'll never find out. All that being said, a victory is a victory, and to those that have been fighting this issue for many years, including Maxime Bernier, this should feel like some major vindication. All right, everyone, that's going to do it for us today on the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Harrison Faulkner, and this is Ratio.